You were handed a candle on the way in. I want you to just hold it. We'll give you some special instruction at the end of the sermon, at the end of chapel today on what to do with them. I see you going and, twist the tops, and I see you tinker with them. Go on, it's okay. It's okay. Go on and tinker with them. Make sure they turn on and off, and if yours doesn't come on when you turn the on switch, just kind of loosely rotate the light a little bit, and it'll come on, but make sure it works. It's a very important aspect of today's sermon. We live in a world that seems to be more binary than necessary. We have partisan politics. We have polemical language, such as the right and the left, liberal and conservative, and of course, bad and good. Yet these binaries rob us of making powerful real-time decisions because they force us to get stuck in what I like to call the paralysis of analysis. If I do this, then what? If I do this, then what will they say about me? If I do this, what side will they subscribe me to be on? And far too often, the then whats drive our if I do this. We tend to think about the potential results as opposed to the action. If you have your Bibles, I would love for you to turn with me to that great section of Daniel, chapter 3, verses 8 through 30. Now, Kristen's given me a short time to preach, and I'm going to be overly ambitious and read a very long passage. But those of you who know me know that probably second to preaching, reading the Bible out loud is one of my favorites. So why don't you join with me? Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into the burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought, so that they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hands, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression on his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he ordered some of the mighty men of the army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their garments, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace. Because the king's orders were so urgent and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said, "True, O king, true, O king." He answered and said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had no power over the bodies of these men. The hair of their heads were not singed, their clothes were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than to serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. We must learn to have the courage to speak up, to say something even when it may cost us something. It takes courage to be in a place that is perceived as comfortable, and then to jeopardize that comfort by saying something. It takes faith to disrupt your privilege or your entitlement by saying something, when saying something may put you in danger, may put you at harm, and may even cost you your life. We must have the courage to say something. These 3 Hebrew brothers were not afraid to say anything to King Nebuchadnezzar and the Chaldeans. The first thing that they said was hashtag Hebrew lives matter. Because if you pay attention to the story, we know that the Hebrew boys, the Jews, were cast down. We don't tend to read race into the Bible, but there was some racism going on. There was some ethnic division going on. And the Chaldeans had seen the Jews and the Hebrews as less than. They had downgraded them. They had condescended them. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, hashtag Hebrew lives matter. They had the courage to say something, to stand up knowing that their God would protect them. But it took courage and it took faith. They could have stood still and worshiped the golden image. They could have done the hip-hop dances when the boom and the bap started going on, but they chose not to. They said, hashtag Hebrew lives matter. And then they said, no pipeline on this sacred ground. Yeah. Where am I going with this? How did the gold get to where it was to create the image? There was a pipeline of gold being brought in to one particular specific place so that they can build this great golden image, which was huge if you read the first part of chapter 3. And so they took the natural resources of gold and they created a pipeline to flow it down, melt it down, and to bring it back up in the image. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, this is sacred ground and we won't desolate it with your greed. And then they said, no longer will you assault our women. Because as captives, we understand the derogatory treatment of everybody, but also the derogatory and insane treatment of the women captives. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no longer will you abuse and assault our women. They had the courage, they had the faith to say something. And then they continued on. They said, down with injustice, down with non-equality, down with your oppressive forces. We refuse to abide by your treachery. And they said, if our God saves us, then you'll know. And if our God chooses not to save us, then we give our lives freely, knowing that we have done the right thing. Not that we are bipartisan, not that we are polemic, not that we are binary, but we've done the right thing. I want to suggest to you that it all goes down in the furnace. The furnace is the battlefield of faith. It's where your calling and your preparation for ministry hits the road. For many of us in ministry, the furnace is the place that we know that we're supposed to go, but we don't want to. It's the place where our fears and our anxieties hold us hostage from going in. And thus, in order to not go into the furnace, we don't do the things that would lead us into the furnace. But God says that the furnace is where I'll show up and make myself manifest. The furnace is where that you'll see that your unanswered prayers and your silent tears in the midnight hours will all come to fruition. That your prayers are answered. And your tears are heard and felt. But you gotta come into the furnace to see. The furnace is where you bear witness to the glory of God and you share the gospel. See, the furnace is where the king, Nebuchadnezzar, gets saved. The furnace is where the king, Nebuchadnezzar, sees that God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is the one and only sovereign God. It's in the furnace that he sees it. It's in the furnace that your enemy will be made your footstool. It's in the furnace where it becomes real, God's promise to never leave you nor forsake you. It's in the furnace where it all goes down. It's in the furnace where miracles and wonders of God never cease. It's in the furnace where every prayer that you have prayed becomes real. It's in the furnace, my brothers and sisters. And all you got to do to go into the furnace is have the courage and have the faith to say something. Even on this great campus, 118 sprawling acres of woods, water, life, we need to say something. When you know that there are brothers and sisters who are hurting, we must say something. When you know that there are people who are afraid and concerned and held hostage by the anxiety of fear and concern, you must say something. When people wonder if anybody cares about my hurts and my pains, if anybody cares if I'm missing in class, if anybody cares when they don't see me in chapel, you must say something. And yeah, we're concerned if I say too much, will they hate me and never talk to me again? If I say too much, will I be a snitch? If I say too much, but you have to say something. And yes, you end up in the furnace, but the furnace is where you want to be. The furnace is why you accepted God's call to the ministry. The furnace is why you're learning your Hebrew and learning your Greek and learning your exegesis and learning your theology. The furnace is why you are learning what you're learning, to prepare you for the furnace. So my brothers and my sisters, you can't be afraid of the furnace. The furnace is where it goes down. The furnace. The battlefield of faith, where everything that you've been praying for, everything that you've been preparing for, everything that God has been inspiring you and giving you gifts and talents to do, the furnace is where it goes down. In your hands, you have a light. Go on and turn that light on. And as you turn this light on, this light symbolizes your furnace experience. Because there are challenges that we have undergone. There are some traumatic experiences that we have had that make the furnace an unpleasant place to be. That there are reasons why we don't want to go into the furnace. You may remember back in your life before you came to faith that life seemed as if it was a furnace. But it's all about your perspective, my brothers and sisters. When you have Christ, that space, that place is a different space. It's a different place. But we want to acknowledge that even within our calling and our preparation, there are some challenges that we're wrestling with. So as you light your furnace experience, where you are, I want you to pray that the situation that has held you paralyzed, that God would move in that situation. The situation that has you afraid and fearful, that God would move in that situation. I want you to pray over your greatest fears, your greatest struggles, your greatest challenges. That paper that you don't want to write, pray over that. I want you to pray for the strength and the courage and the faith to release into God's hands your fears, your anxieties. I want you to pray that you would trust in God in every season, for every reason, in every situation. I want you to pray. And then as you pray, and as you feel ready to release this fiery furnace experience, in the back of the chapel is a brick wall. But in the brick wall are some slats. And I want you to place your fiery furnace experience in a slat in that brick. And Dr. Isaac will be on this side praying and blessing you as you depart from chapel today. I'll be on this side praying with you and blessing you. Our musicians will play as you pray. But I want you to pray over this furnace experience. Use this moment to say something to God about the very thing that has kept you silent, and then release it into God's hand.